Welcome to New Realities. My name is Alan Steinfeld. We're
you.
sitting in front of Marc's collaboration called the Lightfield, which is a multi-dimensional attunement machine, device, environment?
It's really an environment. There's obviously some physical structure that's designed with creating the environment, but the operational part of this is an environment.
Well, the amazing thing about Marc is that he's a scientist who's able to understand metaphysics and higher dimensional physics.
Well, there's three physical spatial dimensions, and then there's time, which people can conceive of a fourth dimension. That's not actually what we're talking about.
That's what I thought.
We're really talking about frequency bands, that the dimensions of existence or experiences, you can talk about each dimension as being a different experience, are basically separated from one another by a frequency band. And they all exist essentially, they're all co-located, essentially.
Well, I don't know what that means, co-located.
Well, imagine, for example, that you could boost your perceptive abilities up to a higher frequency band where you could see things that are happening at a higher frequency rate than we're able to see or feel or touch. What you would then start to perceive as a whole other existence actually occurring in the same locale. That's what I mean by co-located, that it's essentially in the same space, if you will, that's occurring, and what separates them is essentially frequency bands of perception.
How does that apply to the world? I mean, I'm trying to get the idea because I want to really set a groundwork about frequencies. So how do human beings get to that next phase where they can see those frequency shifts?
We're actually, all of us, multidimensional, and there are aspects of awareness that exist for each of us in different frequency bands. And what's happened with most of us that are operating in this frequency band is that this aspect of our awareness has become disconnected from the aspects of our awareness that are actually perceiving and experiencing other frequency bands.
Right. Now, as far as science is concerned, because you come from a very mainstream scientific world, you were a materials expert, you know, nothing more solid than the material, right?
Materials engineer.
Engineer, right.
The very practical side of materials, right.
Right, and then you have this idea that we exist multidimensionally, which I agree with, but how does science feel? How do you explain this to scientists?
Well, I think the best way to, I mean, everybody in the scientific community is used to hearing theories, and you can create theories and ideas about how everything works, and that doesn't really distinguish you very much.
Right.
But if you start to create effects that violate classical physics, then people start paying attention to, well, maybe this person actually knows something about how things actually work, and you can speak with greater authority. It actually happens that, as I say, all of us are multidimensional, and we have layers or different bands of awareness. Most of us operating in this, let me call it the third dimension, are thinking that what we see, touch, taste, smell, etc., is the reality, and mainstream science is very much focused on that.
And the only reality.
The classical teaching has been that that's the only reality. If we can't measure it, taste it, smell it, see its effect, it doesn't exist.
Right.
Which is remarkably
childish.
Childish in a way, yeah. I mean, it's well known in science that the frequency bands in which we perceive are only a fraction of what's there.
Oh, you mean the visible light spectrum?
Yeah, for example, the visible light spectrum versus the radio waves and microwaves and ultraviolet and infrared, all those bands of the electromagnetic spectrum that we know we don't detect in, but that we know that those exist because we can prove they exist via various, physics and experiments. But the fact of the matter is that there are many realities that exist simultaneously. There are multiple levels of consciousness also. And when we come into this experience, when we're born, we typically have multiple levels of consciousness that are connected. And after a number of years, usually 5 years or less, most people start to disconnect those levels of consciousness and they become more and more unaware.
Right, because of our cultural conditioning.
Right.
And if we didn't have that cultural conditioning, we would still maintain an awareness of these other realities.
And a higher capacity of perception. That's right. That's right.
We narrow it down.
That's right.
So somehow you were able to tap in or remember or understand that these realities exist. But you've now created a technology or an environment that then interfaces with these other levels of frequency that we are. Is that right?
What we've actually created is a field that is of a sixth fundamental type. Classical physics only recognizes 5, but there are 6.
5
And
what?
5 fields in physics.
Like what would those fields
like
be?
gravitational fields, electric fields, magnetic fields, and so-called strong and weak nuclear attraction fields.
Which Nassim says doesn't exist. Nassim Harameem says there is no strong and weak, there's only gravity and electromagnetism.
Well, according to classical physics, those are 5 fields that all create effects at a distance from the source of the field.
Okay.
The Russians were the first to really understand in our modern time in depth that there were 6 fields rather than 5, and the nature of the 6th type. And the 6th type of field is what we're dealing with in this unit behind us here called the Lightfield. And we're creating a field that is of the same nature that all living beings create around themselves, that are not physically visible, but in fact exist. And those fields are, in essence, thought fields or fields of ideas or information.
Intention fields or... so you're saying, okay, there's a field that exists around the human being that's not affected by the normal classical physics or even involved in... There's another thing that we can measure and actually see.
Not so easy to measure because it actually doesn't exist in this dimension. So it has no materiality to it. There's no mass to it. There's nothing material there, and it has no energy content per se. And so those would be the things by which classical science judges reality. So if it doesn't have any energy and matter associated with it, according to classical physics, it doesn't exist. But it does, in fact, exist as a communication means between our consciousness and our physical body.
But what is the proof? I mean, I feel it exists because we can feel people at a distance. But what is there proof on whatever level of reality that this 6th field does exist?
There are a number of means of demonstrating that there's something there. First of all, there are some people who have not lost all connection with higher levels of consciousness who can see it and have them independently agree on what they're seeing. So it's pretty human beings in certain cases, if they're more aware, if they have more awareness, can in fact detect those fields. And you can get other life forms to react to those fields.
Okay.
And if you look at the TV show The Dog Whisperer, the way that guy is creating his effect on the dogs is by virtue of the information field that's coming from his consciousness, which they're able to detect and react to.
Well, that's how healers work and intuitives.
Right.
So
There are lots of things that work based upon that.
Right, and there's lots of evidence that
phenomenon.
I've experienced that shows me this is a real field. Now, I mean, this is real for me.
There are also technologies that now exist, the most notable probably being the device which some people call GDV bioelectrography. Was a device, the GDV stands for glow discharge visualization. It's a device that was created, as you know, by Dr. Konstantin Korotkov, who's a Russian scientist. And that one uses the effect of your field on essentially an electric field or plasma to indirectly note that there's something there and detect variations in that field, and uses a computer algorithm to actually project an image of what that field can be idealized to look like, and can detect variations in that field. And it has been shown that variations in consciousness of the individual produce a different output on the image of the device. So there's a physical device that is showing that there's something there.
Okay, so let's say there is this field of information, energy. You've created an environment that will amplify that, change it, bring it back to its original blueprint? I mean,
Well, what it's doing fundamentally is we're synthetically creating an information field, or
with this light field machine.
with this unit, and that field we're creating in a way in which the field that we're creating has a property called coherence. And if you take a living being and you put it into a coherent field, it will start to reconnect with its levels of consciousness. So that phenomenon is the one that we're depending upon with this environment. And it was created basically as a set of training wheels to assist people in reconnecting levels of consciousness and awareness.
So they wake up to that coherent field, which is what they really are when all the junk drops away.
Yeah, coherence is all about order, and disorder is essentially noise. But fundamentally, we now know that the universe is orderly. The work, as you know, of Benoit Mandelbrot in fractal geometry, discoveries by many people in that field, show that everything, in fact, has order at the most fundamental levels.
So is the universe and this kind of evolution we're in now building towards more coherency, the planet, the civilization? This is what it seems like to me. Is that a fair interpretation?
I think it is. I think that there's a phenomenon involved with programming. What these information fields are is they're information that has a purpose of being used in programming. And in fact, we program all the cells in our body continually, unconsciously, that result in a degree of harmony or disharmony in our body by virtue of the action of our subconscious in creating a field like that. Similarly, the galaxy actually has radial bands of information fields that radiate out of it. And the star systems in the galaxy, of which our sun is one, rotate around the center of the galaxy and move from band to band. And we're in the late stages of moving into a new band right now, which is a higher frequency band and has a higher degree of coherence in it that is creating more and more coherence on this planet right now.
And that which isn't coherent seems to actually be becoming less coherent.
Yeah, what happens is when you move into that coherent field, all of the stuff that's incoherent starts to become unstable. And that's what all this chaos looks like. That's what all this chaos is. It looks like disorder occurring on the planet. It's actually the dissolution of lower ideas and their manifestation in favor of higher ideas coming in. So it actually is a very hopeful time right now, but most people look at things and it looks like everything's going to pieces, and they think, the end is near, but it's simply the end of a lower vibrational state giving way to a higher vibrational state.
Well, I agree, and thank you for that. I just did the light field, and I do feel more coherent, actually. I do sound more coherent to myself, but how is it that you artificially create a sort of light technology to, you don't have to give me the actual specifics, but the elements of the environment to create this harmony within the human field?
Well, fundamentally, there are, as was discovered in fractal geometry, geometry is fundamental to everything.
Right.
And there are specific geometries that when you create them, create an information field just by their very existence, which has a property of coherence.
Like the pyramids.
Like the pyramids.
Because that's been proven over millions, thousands of years that there's something that happens. It actually means pyramidion means fire in the middle. So it creates an intensity in the middle. So that's one, yes, proven effect. But there are other geometrics that do that as well.
The so-called sacred geometries, all of that class of geometries, which has been known by metaphysicians for eons, we're discovering it in leading edge physics nowadays. In fact, those geometries produce coherent information fields. And, all of the Platonic solids are examples of that, the cube, the octahedron, dodecahedron, etc. Those geometries, when you create that geometry, it doesn't matter what you create them out of. When you create them, they actually create inherently an information field that's coherent. And the bigger you make them, the stronger that field is. And that's one of the reasons why when you create something like the Great Pyramid, which happens to have proportions of a sacred geometry, there is a coherent field that runs through the middle of it and comes out the top of it also. And because of its size, it's a very strong field. In the case of the Great Pyramid at Giza, where it's missing all of its casing stones, the geometry isn't fully intact, and so it doesn't have as much coherence as it once had. But
have you been there?
I haven't, unfortunately.
Oh, you would
I'd
love
to.
it. And then you lie in the sarcophagus in the king's chamber with those granite stones creating this piezoelectric effect. It actually felt a little bit similar to this. You find a deep peace in there and a sort of centeredness. So maybe that's what it is you're doing. You're creating that kind of intentional gateway to the self that the ancient Egyptians knew about.
Actually, there's a fundamental geometry that's basic to each dimension of existence. And when you create that fundamental geometry, it actually creates a connection to the respective dimension that it's fundamental to. For example, the dimension that we're operating in here, let's say the third dimension, the geometry that's fundamental to this dimension is an octahedron.
An octahedron is...
It's an 8-sided figure, which if you cut it in half, the top half of it looks like the Great Pyramid. And if you imagine its mirror image below it, which would look like the same thing, mirrored, that would be an octahedron.
It's not the cube what's fundamental to this?
No, the cube is actually fundamental to the fifth dimension.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So an octahedron is fundamental to this dimension.
Right. There's a tetrahedron, or more accurately stated, a star tetrahedron that's fundamental to the fourth dimension. A cube is fundamental to the fifth. A dodecahedron is fundamental to the sixth. An icosahedron is fundamental to the seventh.
A star tetrahedron is, because I've seen actually star tetrahedrons in crop circle. I mean, I think that's one of the things they're showing us. So you're saying by overlaying those three-dimensional geometries, we start to reach these other, in a way they carry information from those dimensions into our field.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
You create a connection to those dimensions as soon as you create those geometries. And they create a coherent information field that has a connection to those respective dimensions.
Which is also where we exist, because we are not just limited to this field. So you talk about 8 dimensions. I mean, is that something you want?
Essentially an infinite number of dimensions, but in this octave, the dimensions of existence tend to be structured as octaves in the same respect as music. Actually, it turns out that geometry is fundamental to music also.
That's what Pythagoras,
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, in our creating this information field, we actually derive some of the coherent information field which we project from music. Not just any old music, but music that has the right geometries in it.
Has a
We actually
coherent,
have a technology for separating the information content from the physical sound and conducting, or actually, in this case, the precursor to the physical sound, which is an electromagnetic wave that might come off a CD player or something like that. We can separate the information content and conduct that and project that into this area of space. So we're using that as one means of creating this coherent information field. Another means we're using is actually physical geometry. If you look at the unit, it's obvious that it has a lot of physical geometry associated with it. And thirdly, we're actually taking information from light and separating that from the electromagnetic light
spectrum,
signal, and conducting that, and also projecting it into this area of space. And we have a way of coordinating all three of those together so that they're in sync with each other and that there's coherence, and it produces a very strong field, even though the physical geometry of this unit is tiny compared with, say, the Great Pyramid.
So you're using sacred geometry, you're using sound, and you're using light.
Right.
That's what
Well, we're using sacred geometry, and we're using the information from music and the information from light. And the information from music is inaudible physically, and the information from light is invisible physically.
What do you mean information? I mean, can you
It's the ideas that are the core of them. If you look at light, for example, every living thing is attracted to light. why is it attracted to light? Actually, in this dimension, everything's metaphorical. And why is it attracted to light? It's about what light. It's about the ideas behind light that they're attracted to, such as light symbolizes enlightenment. Light symbolizes truth. Light symbolizes love. Music, symbolizes harmony. Music symbolizes order. It's actually those ideas which attract us, which make the difference between our listening to a piece of music and saying, "Ooh, that's awful," or our saying we feel inspired. It's the ideas behind it. It isn't the physical vibration, which is what a physicist would
transmit the ideas in this device? I mean, how is that?
You can actually. There is technology that we have where we can separate the ideas from the electromagnetic existence of it, and you can conduct ideas through a variety of materials. Certain metals you can conduct ideas through. Some metals will distort the ideas so that what comes out the other end doesn't resemble what you put in, but some metals in fact won't do that. And in fact you can conduct with metals, you can conduct with glass.
But can you say something besides...
conduct with wood. People look at this and they think it's made out of wood because we can't afford anything else. It's made out of wood because from a physics point of view it needs to be made out of wood.
But when you say ideas, I'm still a little confused because that seems like a very personal response to like music, my ideas, but you're saying it's more scientific than that.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that consciousness creates ideas. Ideas create information fields, and information fields actually cause the manifestation of everything else in the universe which we perceive. So everything is the result of ideas created by consciousness. And the ideas, when they're created, are an information field.
So you're seeing the thing behind the manifestation.
That's right.
I see. And
That's
then you're...
the design behind it, the ideas behind it, the spiritual reality of it, if you will,
So you
as
have
opposed to the physical reality.
Yeah, you have to be pretty open yourself in order to... I mean, you are, but, I think that's something... It's your intuition, it's your kind of psychic, empathic response to reality out there that you seem to be bringing to this environment. Is that fair?
I think all creation, or what we regard as creativity, uses, of course, intuition.
Yeah.
And in creating things from a scientific point of view, you're creating things using those same capabilities, intuition, but you're using your scientific knowledge and understanding to interpret what it is you're getting and to critique it and be skeptical of it until you can prove that there's some reality to it.
You've created something amazing and you keep modifying it, right? I mean, it's what you're saying. You keep upgrading because of the more information you're getting for this machine or this device.
Really, my perspective of the creative process in any of us is that it's a receiving process. We actually don't create anything, we receive it. And we receive it, in this particular level of consciousness so that we can use it in this level. And I think that's true of composers, it's true of sculptors, it's true of all artists and inventors and, all of that. All of us that do creative processes at a high level, I think, understand that we're just receiving information. We're not really creating, we're receiving it. And we have received, in detail, all of the knowledge, a group of us have received all of the knowledge necessary to create this particular embodiment and its effects, and we're progressively continuing to receive upgrades to it. And it's interesting, sometimes we've asked ourselves and others have asked us, well, why didn't you just create the upgraded version in the first place?
Right.
And part of the answer is that actually the technologies that we're using didn't exist early enough for us to create them when we first created the unit itself. And the unit itself couldn't have been created a year earlier because some of the technologies we're using didn't exist in this dimension.
And also maybe the world wasn't ready.
That's the other part of the answer.
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
That it has to mirror or parallel the evolution of consciousness on the planet in terms of what you're able to actually bring in here.
So this is a device for consciousness, and a device to accelerate consciousness so we can be who we truly are.
Yeah, it's a set of training wheels which creates an environment which, when we're in that environment, we fundamentally start to remember who we really are without distortion and without all this separation of one level of awareness from another.
You use it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what do you get when you use it? Did you say, oh, that's interesting? I mean, you surprised by the effects you get from it?
I'm not surprised by them because we knew, as in the process of receiving the information, we knew what it was supposed to do before we ever flipped the switch. But I'm gratified by being in there because, first of all, you tend to jettison a lot of baggage progressively that you picked up in the process of living, which represents a corruption of identity, essentially, and limitation. So emotional trauma you tend to start to get rid of. So when you come out of there, whether you're aware or not of what the emotional trauma is, you feel relieved. So you feel revitalized, and you sort of feel yourself filling up with life force, and you feel renewed. And what life force is at the most fundamental level is actually love. Love and life force are the same thing.
Nice.
And the highest form of coherence you can create is a field based upon love and gratitude, which is actually part of what is used to create this field.
Have you been surprised?
Oh yeah.
By what?
Well, I've been surprised by a lot of the additional information that comes in that represent various forms of revelation as to just how amazing we all really are and the possibilities that really exist. And I fundamentally am quite aware of the fact that everything that you can possibly imagine is possible. And but when you start seeing the reality of that, it's a whole different experience, and you really enjoy that.
Wow. And we are seeing a great reality shift coming to the planet.
We are, yeah, in so many ways right now.
Thank you, Marc,
Yeah,
for
it's a pleasure.
your work,
always
your
is.
dedication, your commitment to consciousness as an architect of expansion, as a creator of those that are, for helping those that are here to evolve.
Well, as you're aware, there are large numbers of all of us around the planet that are waking up and helping others to awaken and are part of that process.
Thank you. I'm here with Marc Newkirk for the Lightfield, at the Lightfield itself, which is right now the only one in the world, but there'll be more that will be coming, right?
Yeah, it's part of a charitable activity called the Lightfield Foundation.
And thank you. We'll do it again, and as the upgrades come in, I'll try it out and see if I actually get more coherence.
Great. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks for watching. This is New Realities, and if you have any questions, email me at newrealities@earthlink.net and check my website, newrealities.com. Thanks for watching.